He's almost 9 months. He got the croup last week, and he, of course, has passed it on to me as a cold, and he's fine now. He's just happy and but it still lingers. So I have to cough or sneeze. Apologize in advance. So my name's Andrea Colors. I'm an assistant professor here at Missouri Southern and in the kinesiology department. And my background is I'm a registered dietitian, and then I earned my PhD in nutritional biology at the University of California in Davis. I'm from Joplin, and so I moved back here a couple of years ago and started working here at Southern. So this is very informal. When I talked to Greg about this, I told him that a lot of times when I talk to people, I really just like to answer questions. So I'll provide some information. But if you have nutrition questions you've been wondering about, ask me. It's amazing to me how much false information is out there. And so if I can, and also a lot of us have personal questions like, oh, I read this or that. And so if you do have things that you'd like to know specifically or things that I bring up you'd like to know, don't be shy. Just raise your hand or just ask, and we can kind of go from there. This, like I said, is very informal. So I'm here for you guys to be a resource. And after saying that, if you do, I should have brought some cards, but if you do have questions after this, you always feel free to email me or call or stop by my office, and Greg has my contact information. So I kind of just kind of eat this, not that, and so I'm just going to talk about some really basic information, how to make the right choices. So whether you're at the grocery store, whether you're at a restaurant, how can we make better choices? And so just some guidelines to follow with that. So one of the best things to do is, if you're at the grocery store, is really to look at a food label. A food label can give you a lot of information. And so people often ask me, how do you know if I should eat this? Or how do I know if this is a healthy food? And it can be challenging, especially from the front of the package. One example I like now is, and my husband eats this, so he likes Cinnamon Toast Crunch, which is fine, but it says whole wheat. It says whole wheat Cinnamon Toast Crunch on big letters on the front of the box. And so to a lot of consumers, oh, it's whole grains, it's whole wheat, this is healthy, this is a good option for cereal. And unfortunately, that's really not the case. It's really a high sugar, not a very nutritious choice, but a lot of front of the label packages say things like, this contains fiber, this contains whole grains, or et cetera, or no trans fats. But it can be misleading unless we actually look at the food label, the nutrition facts label itself, or even the ingredients list. So things I like to look at, and luckily the first one, calories per serving, is a lot better now than it used to be. Several years ago, the food manufacturers really had free range on what was a serving. So they might sell you a big bottle and on the nutrition facts label it might say 1 serving. Well, a 40-ounce bottle really isn't 1 serving, and they would put the number of calories for that 1 serving. But now serving sizes have to be more normal. And so like if you look at a 20-ounce soda bottle, it might say 1.5 servings, or like a bag of chips, if it's bigger than an ounce, it will say more than that. And so it lets you know how many calories per serving, which is a good thing to look at. Examples, if you're making a choice between two certain things, there's huge variance in things like protein bars or energy bars, or so if you're wanting, I know as college students, myself included, I keep snacks in my office, or I'll keep snacks in my purse. And so if I'm looking at a bar to take with me, a bar may range from like 250 calories per bar to 90 calories per bar. And if you're looking for weight control, or just wanting to watch how many calories you're consuming, that becomes important. So looking at the number of calories for things like that. And then another big thing I think to look at is protein. So one rule of thumb I always let people know if they're wanting help with their diet is whenever you have a snack or a meal, have some protein at that time, because protein is going to make you stay full longer, and it has a lot of good nutrition in it. And a lot of times, especially women, we find it hard to get enough protein in our diet throughout the day. So consuming protein at each meal or snack can be a positive, and so looking at that food label. And protein doesn't have to just be meat, chicken, beef, etc. Great protein sources are things like peanut butter, nuts, seeds, beans, dairy. And so we can kind of break out of the box sometimes and really get some good protein sources that aren't meat. And so for snack-wise, I see students a lot, they'll have a container of peanut butter they've brought with them. And that's a great, or nuts, a little bag of nuts they've brought with them. And that's a great way to get protein during the day, when it might be harder to bring a chicken breast or something that needs to be kept cool. Things like peanut butter and nuts are much more shelf stable. But trying to get protein in your diet at each meal or snack, and getting a little bit throughout the day is going to is really much better than getting it all at once, because you are getting you're helping with that satiety, keeping that feeling of fullness longer throughout the day, and your body is able to really utilize the amino acids in that protein in smaller amounts, whereas if you take it all in at once, it may not be able to, there may be too much competition with those nutrients going on. And oftentimes people ask about how many grams of protein should you have a day. And my kind of easy way to think about it is if we convert our body weight to kilograms, which is really kind of dividing your body weight in half, kind of 1 gram of protein per kilogram of body weight. So that's kind of an easy way to think about it. And then distributing that out throughout the day. So see, I need 60 grams of protein a day, and I'm going to eat 3 meals and 2 snacks. You may be trying to get 15 grams at each meal and then 10 grams at each snack or something. So and I'm not one for counting calories or counting grams, but just kind of being mindful of that when you make your food choices. Fiber is another really big important thing, and it's important for several reasons. One is that, like protein, it's going to make you feel full longer. And then the other reason it's so good is it has all these health components to it. There's soluble fiber, like beans, lentils, oat bran. So, when you buy oatmeal, on the front of the oatmeal container, it says helps reduce heart disease or cardiovascular disease risk. So that's the soluble fiber. And then insoluble fiber really helps with kind of that regularity issue that people have, and just colon health in general. I've been reading lately, and I actually read an article this morning. We have millions and millions of bacteria in our gut that are really healthy. We actually want them there, and that insoluble fiber is really going to help that colony of gut bacteria stay there and be healthy. And what they're finding is there's actually a relationship between body weight and gut bacteria. So if we eat more fruits and vegetables, things with more fiber, we have this healthy colon bacteria. They see that people have a lower body weight, and they think that it has to do with what we're eating, what we're putting in our body is helping to regulate those gut bacteria, and that's our body weight. And so we're learning more and more about it all the time. And that article I read today was talking about people with C. diff, which is a really horrible infection of the GI tract, and they're now treating it with fecal transplants, which sounds bizarre, but they take good bacteria, or people that have really good gut bacteria, and transplant their fecal matter to people that have these infections, and it works, which is just a really bizarre concept. But so what we eat really does, it affects our health in strange ways. And so maybe that was too much information, but it really is information.
Gross information.
Yeah, gross information. But as someone who, as a dietitian, as someone in nutrition, it just amazes me all the time how food affects so many different things in our body. I never would have thought 5 years ago that what I ate for breakfast is going to affect these gut microbes in my colon that then affect my health long term, but it does. It's kind of cool. Other things to look at on that food label: sodium, IV salt, And what's interesting, I think, is most of the salt that we eat doesn't come from the salt shaker on our table. It really comes from what we buy. I'm having some thyroid issues, so I had to take iodine, so they wanted me on a low iodine diet, and most things that have salt in it have iodine in it. And so I've become increasingly aware of everything I eat has salt. And so really almost everything you get at the grocery store, if you haven't cooked it yourself, it's going to have salt in it. And salt isn't bad. We need salt. We need sodium in our body. It really plays an important function. But when we get too much of it, it can increase our risk for high blood pressure and other things. The way I like to look at it is if we increase potassium, potassium and sodium kind of balance each other out. And so it's not so much about how much salt we eat, it's about can we get enough potassium, which is in fruits and vegetables, to counteract that salt. And so oftentimes I ask people, I'll ask you guys, how many servings of fruits and vegetables do you usually eat a day? 1? Anybody eat 1 a day? 2? 3?
Depends on the day.
4? Okay. So, and then how many, and the guideline is we want to try and get about 5 servings of fruits and vegetables. And a serving may be half of a banana. A salad may have 5 servings in it. And then how many packaged items, things that you open in a package, do you eat every day? And when you think about that, we want to eat as many, if not more, fruits and vegetables as we do packaged foods. And that's kind of that sodium-potassium balance. Things that are natural, that aren't in a package, we're going to have lots of potassium. And things that are in a package are going to be higher in sodium. And so we really just want to balance that out as much as we can. And then other things to look at in terms of fat, we want fat in our food. I think in the 90s, a lot of you are too young, but some of you guys remember in the 90s, everything was fat-free this, fat-free that. And we've come to learn that fat is really important. We need it in our diet. And it's like protein and fiber. It's going to help us stay full longer, and it has a lot of health benefits. But certain fats, like this trans fat, don't. Those are going to increase our risk for cardiovascular disease. And food manufacturers now have to list on the box or the package if a food contains trans fats, but they only have to do that if it has more than 0.5 gram per serving. And so companies can be kind of tricky, and they may not let the consumer know that it's in there even though it is. And so the best thing to do is really look at that nutrition label and see if it has on the ingredient list hydrogenated fatty acid or hydrogenated fat. Because if it does, it has those trans fats. Like an example where it might make a difference, and this is me, I have a huge sweet tooth. If I buy the rolled up cookie dough, and I'm gonna make cookies, and maybe 2 cookies is a serving, 2 small cookies is a serving. And one day, I'm gonna eat a lot more than 2 chocolate chip cookies, especially if it's on the weekend and I'm at home. And so if 2 cookies have 0.5 gram of saturated fat, that might be okay, but if I'm eating 4 or 6 cookies a day, that's when those trans fats really start to add up, and it does matter for our diet. So if you're wanting to eliminate those from your diet, sometimes if you're buying things in a package, it's good to actually look at the ingredients because it may be unclear from the label itself. And then the last 2 are really kind of the more hot topics right now, that high fructose corn syrup and added sugars. And I think one good thing I can say is that they're going to be revamping the nutrition label, and they're going to be putting on there if something they're going to be separating out if something's an added sugar or not. And so yogurt, for example, has a lot of natural sugars, which are good. Fruit has natural sugars. Natural sugars are good for us. They're not going to hurt us like that artificial or the added sugars. And so, but a lot of times if you buy yogurt, I was buying soy milk and yogurt, and I was trying to buy plain. And I was, doing pretty good, I thought, and then they were out of the brand, so I bought a substitute brand. I'm like, man, this is really sweet for plain. And I look on the back, and I see in the ingredient list that they've added sugar to the plain, but on the nutrition facts label, I couldn't tell, that if there was added sugar or not. And so in some instances in foods that have natural sugar, it will be really nice to know if companies have added sugar. Brahms add sugar to their milk. And unless it's hard to know that, but once they have to make those changes to the nutrition facts label, it just allows us to be better informed consumers. I think the more information we have, it lets us make a choice. It's not bad to eat yogurt flavored with sugar, but if you want to or don't want to, I think we deserve to have that choice, and this new label, I think, will help with that. So those are just things to kind of think about when you look at the food label, and I have some kind of food label examples. So we have our different fats, the sugars, the fibers, that we just kind of want to look at per serving. So, I think the fiber and the calories, protein, those are really important things to look at.
Go back to that just for a second, I'm sorry. I get amazed at like bags of chips or whatever, say one serving is 12 chips. I'm like, who can sit and eat just 12 chips?
Oh, I agree.
I can't eat just 12.
And that's one reason looking at what the serving size is really important, because, like I said, with the cookies, the serving size that they're giving you for a cookie is probably a pretty small cookie, and it's 2 of them. And so if I'm only eating that small amount, it may not matter that it has trans fat in it, but if I eat what I really eat, it does matter. And so same thing like with the sodium or the fat. It may not be bad, this nutrition label doesn't look bad, but say this is like M&Ms or something tiny. Of course I'm going to eat more than 21 M&Ms probably. And so how does this nutrition label translate to how much I'm really eating? With ice cream, a serving size is a half a cup. Who in this room eats a half a cup of ice cream? I mean,
what's the point?
It's smaller than, it's like half the size of your fist. And so it's really kind of important to think about, and that's when making a choice, I can be like, okay, I really will eat a small amount, so I'm going to go with the higher calorie, higher fat option, or I know I'm going to eat a lot of this. It's just my personality, so maybe I want to choose a lower calorie option. Yeah.
Do you think when they revamp the nutritional facts that they'll put like the percentage, the daily value for sugar? Because there's not one for sugar.
Right. And the thing is I'm, as a dietitian, I actually think this percent daily value isn't the best thing because it's hard. The percent daily value is saying if I eat 2,000 calories a day from this one food, I'm getting this percent of my nutrient intake. Most of us don't eat 2,000. I mean, we eat less, we eat more. It's really such an arbitrary number. I think it's hard to know what those make sense. I think if they do, I think they are keeping that percent daily value though. So for sugars, I don't know if they'll have it or not because there's not like an RDA. There's not a recommended daily allowance for sugar. So we know how many, it's still really kind of up there. There's a doctor, Robert Lustig, and he says we should have about, I want to say 3 tablespoons of no more than 3 tablespoons of added sugar a day. And things like a soda is like 10 tablespoons. So things like that. So, and so when we think about, and it doesn't mean natural sugars. So if you're using, and that's when using fruit or things like that to really, or yogurt, dairy that have natural sugars kind of in place of added sugars. So, but it is hard. I have, like I said, I have a baby, and I was wanting to buy him applesauce this week. And how many containers of applesauce did I have to look at? Even if it said natural, they still all had added sugar. So it took me, 5 minutes to find one reading all the ingredients because I wanted one without added sugar. Because I don't want him to get the sweet tooth I have, trying to prevent that. Babies don't need that added sugar. So trying to read those labels can be challenging. So
it's also challenging when you're, I was looking at carbohydrates being a diabetic, so, the percentage is going to be different for somebody like myself versus somebody who's not, and so that, I got tired of it.
Yeah, so I really think just kind of, thinking about the grams of sugar and, how much has been added, and looking at it in context of the food and what you're eating throughout the day. So I hope that, and I don't know if this will happen, but if they do revamp the nutrition facts label, that somehow there'll be a public service campaign. So at least trying to get education out there to consumers about what the changes mean, how can we use these labels. Because I think that's, with a lot of the information we have, like with My Plate, I don't know if you guys all seen the My Plate. In some instances, there's great, people know about things, there's great education, but a lot of stuff just kind of sits there, and it's not explained to consumers, so they don't know the best way to utilize the information. So this is just a food label, lots and lots of ingredients. I'm trying to think, I know I tried to find some. So this is hydrogenated palm kernel oil. And so it could say 0 grams. So like this food says trans fat 0. It could say that on the nutrition facts label, but in the ingredients, if it has hydrogenated palm kernel oil, it still has trans fats in it. And so if you are trying to avoid those, if you're at high risk for heart disease, if someone in your family is and you're trying to avoid trans fats, I would recommend oftentimes looking at the nutrition facts label, because it can be, or the ingredients label, because it can be misleading, unfortunately.
I think my wife, when she looks at labels, she kind of looks at it, if there's words on there I can't pronounce,
Yeah.
it's something I probably don't want.
Totally. And so like this one, I think I have one on here in a little bit. Maybe not. Oh yeah. So look, like this bread has wheat flour, and it has our flour in the United States is fortified, so it has what it's fortified with: salt, yeast, and flour. And that's one bread. And then look at this bread. Wheat gluten, wheat bran, ethyl oxalated mono and triglycerides, sodium, sterol, lactolate. And so thinking about, what one do I want to choose? And so yeah, I think that's, and it doesn't like this, it doesn't necessarily, some of these things, are fine, but I agree kind of, if you can understand the ingredients, it's a little bit, maybe a better choice. And that's why we're coming in and, the whole buy local movement is that usually if you're buying from a local manufacturer, their products are probably going to be more like, I don't know where I went, more like this one than that one. And so kind of thinking about that when you're making choices. So just some things that I think about shopping the outer edge of the grocery store. So how many of the foods that you buy can you buy from those outer edges? I'm not including the bakery, but buying those fresh meats, buying the fresh fruits and vegetables, buying the dairy, the things that are more around the edges. Because when we do get, and I do this too, I shop the middles as much as anyone, but trying to, as we shop more of the middle aisles, we are more likely to buy food with ingredients we can't pronounce, and so that have added sodium in them. Eat the colors of the rainbow, have a protein source at each meal or snack. So those are some just basic pointers. When we look at whole grains, I'm reading the label. Again, the whole grain cinnamon toast crunch. Just because it has some whole grains in it doesn't really make it the best breakfast choice as they're advertising it. So food manufacturers, their job is to make money, and so sometimes we have, we have to kind of look beyond the outside label they're advertising. And one way to do that is that ingredient list again. So enriched wheat flour, unbleached enriched wheat flour, so looking things with wheat flours. The added sugars are everywhere. If you want to stop eating as many added sugars and you take the time to read the labels or the ingredients, it's like, oh my gosh, they're everywhere. Things like yogurt, milk, and a lot of times I tell people, plain yogurt it takes some getting used to, but sometimes when we buy things that are plain, adding your own sugar, adding some jam, adding some honey, sweetening it yourself can be a lot better than sometimes the manufacturer sweetening it, because you're probably going to add a lot less than they do. Condiments, salad dressings, ketchup, everything tends to have sugar in it. And so maybe reading the label and seeing how many sugars, if you're wanting to reduce those. Greg, I bet if you're watching your carbohydrate intake, you probably really notice that the sugars are everywhere.
Mhm.
Yeah. Fruit
Especially
juice.
soda, which I love.
Things like fruit juice. One thing that I do if I want to drink juice, because it is just a lot of added sugar, but sometimes I get tired of water, I dilute my juice with water. I kind of do a half and half. And that's something you can get that kind of that sweetness, but not as much sugar.
What do you think of the little squirt things you can flavor your water?
Yeah, I think those,
Is that adding much sugar or?
well, a lot of them, I don't really know exactly the ones you're talking about. I can't tell you about those
Right.
ingredients. A lot of them do have artificial sweeteners, which I think have their place, and I think, drinking or eating some things with them are fine. But I can't remember who I was talking to. And like the amount of, maybe maybe a Crystal Light that they were drinking a day, it was like 2 gallons. And I'm like, that might be, you might want to water that, or, because that might be excessive, And so trying to, even with artificial sweeteners, really having a balance there, because it can, I think too much of anything is too much. And so, too much water isn't good for us. So not always choosing, maybe using some of those things to flavor your water, but not excessive amounts. So, and then when looking at milk alternatives, because a lot of us can't consume dairy, my beef with almond and rice milk, or if you read the ingredient label, or the nutrition facts label, there's like maybe 1 gram of protein, and I think that's really deceiving with almond milk. You think that it's going to have lots of protein in it because it's almond milk, but actually there's very little protein, and it's primarily just sugar and water. So looking at nutrition facts labels can make a difference when choosing those alternatives. And then these are just, I'll probably take questions, but these are just things from different restaurants. How can you make different choices? And just when you look at a sodium level, one Arby's sandwich has twice as much sodium as the other. And so a lot of restaurants now, and I think more are going to be doing this as if they're national chains, are going to be adding calorie levels to their food. And there has been some research that shows that doesn't matter, that people don't change eating behaviors based on that. But I think it will give us, as consumers, the option, the choice to know what's in our food. And so these were just different things. Just McDonald's, Chipotle.
Go back to that slide just a second, I'm sorry. Okay, thank you.
Yeah, so, and it's really, so if you just have the Big Mac and a glass of water, that's not bad. But when we add the extra large fries and the giant soda, that's when things really start to add up. And just realistically in life, we're gonna eat fast food because sometimes it's just all we have is the option. We have our kids, we have our husband, we have our job, we're trying to get places, and it's trying to just make the best choice that we can when we are somewhere. And so thinking about that. So questions? Any type of nutrition question, diet question, anything like that.
What do you know about the NGOs?
Oh, yeah. So and then I think the genetic modified food, the GMOs. You said it, and the GMOs, the genetically modified foods. It's a tricky conversation. In one instance, if any tomato you've ever bought at the grocery store, because farmers use genetic modification to improve crops just naturally. So that's one argument. People say it's been around forever. The other argument is that it's unnatural, that they're modifying things in our food source. Is it going to be dangerous for us? Science-wise, there's not really an answer out there. But I think as a consumer and a dietitian, it needs to be labeled, because I want to have a choice. I just want to know. And if they really aren't bad for us one way or another, then what's the problem with labeling? I'm just in a big support of labeling menus, labeling on the food products, so that we as a consumer can make that choice ourselves. And so that's kind of my opinion, because right now without a label, you don't know. And if you don't want to eat that, or you don't want to feed those foods to your family, you don't have that choice. And they may be perfectly healthy and normal, but I think we as the consumers have that right to know. And so that's kind of my opinion, because I don't know if they're good or bad, but I should have the choice to make that decision on purchasing. Any other, and some of you may know more about the GMOs than I do, but any questions?
Who oversees the labeling for companies?
Yeah.
Make sure they're telling us the truth.
Yeah,
and
that's
what
a
are
hard.
some penalties if they
Yeah,
aren't?
and I'm also going to throw in something about supplements as well. So food is really overseen. A lot of foods like meat, dairy, or their labeling's overseen, fruits and vegetables, by the USDA. But most packaged foods, their labeling is going to be overseen by the FDA. Food companies, and I had a friend once who owned like an ice cream cookie company out in California, and he said that because what companies do, and I worked on a research study, and we did this for our research study because we wanted to know what was in the food, but you kind of mash up, kind of blend up the food products, so the ice cream cookie, and then you send it off to a company and they analyze it for you. And he said they would usually send their food product off to about 3 companies, and whichever analysis they got back they liked the most was the one they would send to the FDA. And so I think they have to, when they submit their labeling requirements, they have to submit that, it's kind of that certification of analysis.
So they sent it to 3 different places and 3 different reports came back.
And it does, because there's just that they're blending up the food, and then they take a sample of that substance and analyze it, and so there may be different, just that variability. We worked with a company that was making rice milk, and they add calcium to it, but the calcium was insoluble, so it kind of sank to the bottom. And so when they filled the containers of the rice milk, if you bought a container at one part of the batch, it would have a different calcium level than those at the bottom, because the calcium sunk. And they would try and keep it stored up, but there was just that variability. The FDA allows about a 20% range. If they decided to check your food, you need to be within 20% of what your food label says. And so there is that variability. Supplements. So supplements are considered food and not drugs. And so there is really very, very little regulation over supplements. If you're buying from a big national brand, usually they're going to have much more quality control because they're a big company and they're a little bit more concerned, or they have the money to invest in quality control. But a lot of supplements, what they say are in them are not, especially the herbal supplements. You see either nothing may be in it, it may just all be filler, or there have been some instances when they analyze them and there's actually prescription medications that have been inserted in supplements. And so just buyer beware. I'm not saying don't take a supplement, especially like the vitamin mineral supplements are pretty well what they say they are, but we see a lot, there's a lot of reports in the kind of the herbal supplement area that what is in the bottle isn't what they say. Kind of another thing about supplements, I teach an online nutrition course, and the students every week kind of do a diet record and then talk about, are they getting the vitamins and minerals that we're discussing that week? And, it's hard to, and a lot of them aren't, and they want to they ask me what supplement they should take. Just this week, there was more research out that large doses of antioxidants, so vitamin A, C, E, are not good for us. So several years ago, they thought that getting high intakes, I think of vitamin A and C, people thought that's going to be great. These are really good things we need. In our diet, they are, but when we eat large doses in a pill form, what they saw in this recent study was that if you have cancer and you're taking large doses of these antioxidants, it actually makes your cancer metastasize more. And so the cancer cells feed off of them. And so I thought that was really interesting. The other study had been in smokers and thinking that large amount of antioxidants would really help prevent lung cancer and be really good. And they found that it wasn't, and actually did the opposite effect. So taking large amounts of supplements, again, too much of anything isn't good for us. So getting them in our diet, taking a basic multivitamin mineral, those things are fine. But when you go to those mega doses of supplement of pills, they can often have negative effects. So just things to think about when you are deciding what supplements or what to buy.
There's a very common smoothie, I believe was avocado and milk.
Mm-hmm.
And how would that rate as far as like avocado, a small, all we get around here are small avocados.
I am.
Sorry, but that and a cup and a half of milk.
I think I love avocados. My new big thing is avocado toast. So taking avocado and rubbing it on toast. I think that